going a real good last time, not good enough today. 187.10, 187.10 miles per hour. There in that staging area to fire up now is Warren, Colburn, Warren.
The sounds you've just heard are those of a drag race, a sport which since its beginning in late 1948 has grown to become one of the largest outdoor spectator sports in America. Drag racing started in Southern California and at first was centered around the cities of Santa Barbara, Pomona, and Santa Ana. It came into being due to the foresight of a few enthusiasts, police officials, civic leaders, and other responsible citizens who wanted to curb the rising rate of traffic violations and accidents due to racing on city streets. The many obstacles, especially the unfavorable publicity, and the very idea of turning loose a bunch of young hot rodders on a racing track was enough to cause a hue and cry that could be heard all over the state. But finally, due to being able to show the local community leaders that this could be a well-organized, safe operation, the first drag events were started, and hot rodders had their chance. Needless to say, it was a 100% success right off the bat. The very idea of being able to legally race your car, have it safety checked, and possibly win a trophy for a cost of $1 or $1.50 was a hot rodder's delight. But in return for the chance to do this, hot rodders were asked for two things, both of which have been carried out faithfully. First, that every possible safety precaution would be taken at the drag strip, and second, that drag racing on city streets would stop. In this album of the history of drag racing, you're going to hear not only the sounds of actual races, but also interviews with men who have been instrumental in bringing drag racing from a backyard mechanic type of sport to where today it's considered to be another major form of racing in the United States. You'll also hear Mr. Wally Parks, president of the National Hot Rod Association, give a description of the NHRA, its services, its goals, and most important, its safety record. So without further ado, let's begin our album of the history of drag racing with an interview with Jack Chrisman, one of the very first true drag racers in the country.
Jack, how about telling us a little bit about the early days at Santa Ana, how it got started and what you were driving and so forth?
Well, the first car that I drove was a little 29 Model A sedan. We run it with a flathead in it. Switched from a flathead into the Chrysler. From there, I went into Wayne Reed's Roadster, which was a Chrysler-powered gas roadster.
What were the speeds you were turning in those early days?
In the sedan, we run 116, which at that time we thought was real good. Then into the Roadster, we ran into the 40s, 140 miles an hour.
In the classes today, roughly the same classes, what are the speeds have increased to today?
Oh, golly, they've jumped to 160 in the Roadster. In the Model A sedan class, they've run 25 to 30.
How do you feel about being an official now, working with the National Hot Rod Associations? Do you feel there's as much enthusiasm about it today as there was when it started, or has it become a little more professional and less amateur?
Well, it's a lot more professional than it was. Of course, there's more money up. The guys work harder at it, and there's more money being put into it, so it's naturally more professional.
Thank you very much, Jack.
There we go, beautiful machine, Oldsboro Power Plant. Not good enough, 8:23, but it's getting a lot quicker than yesterday at 189.
Mickey Thompson, one of the world's fastest drivers, came over to our Capitol mics to tell us about the building of his first dragster. At the time, a major breakthrough in fuel dragsters.
Right now we're standing with Mickey Thompson, certainly a well-known name in the racing circles. Bonneville, Indianapolis, drag strip, just about everything, Mickey. Mainly today what I'd like to talk to you about is your association with the drag racing sport, and like when you were manager of the Lions drag strip and so forth and so on. How did you get started in drag racing, Mickey?
Well, I was just, when I was a young fellow, I imagine 15 years old, we started racing to dry lakes, and drag racing came along, and at that time there was no drag strip, so as soon as I had the first opportunity to organize or start one, why, we accepted it.
And that was the Lions?
Yes, sir, that was.
I drove my first race down there, the first time you opened it on your very first Sunday.
Must have been a madhouse.
It sure was a madhouse, and the first invitational too. Mickey, you used to run a streamlined car down there. I think you were one of the first to go around the 150 mile an hour mark with it. How did you get an idea for not only the streamlining but the slingshot?
Well, I just knew that we needed more traction. We couldn't get traction sitting ahead of the wheels, and also when you sit further back, well, you can see more what the car is doing. You have more of a feel. So I just tried it, and incidentally, Pomona's the first place I tried it here, and they wouldn't let us run it the first time. They said it was impractical and illegal. But as you know, they're all now running.
Today, no one runs anything else than slingshot.
That's correct.
What are your plans for the future, Mickey, now that you're a manufacturer? Are you going to stay as a competitor, or are you just going to go into manufacturing, or what?
Oh, no, it's strictly manufacturing. In fact, I wouldn't be driving today, except that my driver, Danny Angaias, is driving his own car, and yesterday we ended up with both cars in the race, so I had to drive the cars yesterday, and I don't particularly enjoy driving them anymore. I just like to more or less work on them.
Design them. How about Indianapolis? Are you going to be there again this year?
You bet your life, I sure am.
With the rear engines and the little cars?
Yes, the same ones I did last year, ran last year, except for the small wheels. The USACs declared them illegal. And next year, why, we'll be back with the 15-inch wheels.
Well, best of luck, Mickey, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Automotive Engine and Equipment Company on the street side, calling out of Texas. Hey, supercharged on the go. Herbrey's apparently losing the power in that gigantic hole. And the Chevy machine on its way, having full of good trouble also.
Art Malone, one of the few full-time professional dragster drivers, a finisher at this year's Indianapolis race.
Standing now with Art Malone, who is one of the professional drag racers today on the scene. Art, I understand you're one of the few that actually make your living campaigning across the country, driving professionally in drag racing.
Yeah, there's not too many of them. It's becoming more and more now, though, as drag racing gets bigger.
In other words, you'd say this is becoming a professional sport now, along with the big car drivers and the midget circles and such as that.
Yes, I think it's gonna go right by the circle racing. I think drag racing is going a long ways.
You started, I understand, in Florida for Don Garlits, certainly, who is one of our top drivers. How long were you with him before you split out on your own?
I started driving for Don in 1959. I drove for him until the middle of 1960.
And now, of course, you're one of his prime competitors. I understand you meet just about every weekend.
Yeah, we run pretty regular, and we're real competitive.
Let me ask you, are you still in the competition today here?
No, I'm out today. We had farriers, mag farriers on the car, and I've got it fixed now, but it's too late.
What was the top speed in your lapse time that you turned at this particular meet?
The last run I made was the first run that I got the bugs worked out. It went 187.50 and 823, which it'll go a lot better than that, but we have to start tuning it now for the
Let me ask you, have you ever seen competition in field classes in one place as you have today?
This really, honestly, is the fastest meet I've ever been to in my life. I've never seen such a lapse time nor speeds turned, really.
Well, Art Malone, lots of luck in the future on your professional trails, and thank you for your little interview.
Thank you.
Be sure you pick up a national dragster or a program. It's got all the information in it. And check out the cars, drivers, owners, what state they're from as they go through the drafts. If you have one of the programs or the national dragster, be so sure and pick one up. Herbrey's. In the staging area, CDR Special, Nichols, Colbert, Denver, Colorado, Dodge, AA gas machine. On the street side, tower side, the AA. Lost the blower valve. There it is, right on the strip. Everything else, A-OK apparently. Just lost the blower valve. Unfortunately, looked like it would have been a real strong run. This man is going to have to go to qualify.
To give you an exact picture of safety precautions, we interviewed Ed Eaton of the NHRA right at the starting line.
Ed, the first thing anyone notices when they come to a National Hot Rod Association event is the fantastic safety precautions taken. I noticed that looking at your jacket here, your motto is dedicated to safety. Can you tell us a little bit about the safety precautions, please?
Yes, Jim. Like you say, a lot of people do realize the safety end of it. A lot don't. The safety starts years before the event itself with the guys building the cars. We have our safety inspection the day prior to the event, and that's when the entire vehicle itself, every car in competition, whether we run 500 or 1,000, every piece of equipment is gone over by hand by expert mechanics, from the wells to the safety equipment, the whole ball of wax on it. So that very much starts it out with the cars. Then we come into track safety. A slippery track what we call in drag racing, which means a track with a light amount of traction on a thing, could be a hazardous condition. So our first and foremost thing out here in the physical end of it is track condition. All right, we satisfy our desire for good traction by strong detergents and various formulas for improving traction. Then comes spectators. Now that we have the contestants all bolted in, you might say, or belted in good cars, we have to be concerned about the spectators. So we have large retaining spectator fence, hay bales, guardrails, police details, and everything to keep the crowds away from the cars and the cars away from the crowds.
Well, I understand that after literally having millions of runs in the past 10 or 12 years, fatalities, either spectator or contestant, have been amazingly small. Is this true?
Very true, and the amazing part about it, we compared all spectator fatalities a few years back, or contestant fatalities, I should say, with that of football, sandlot football, pro football, etc. like that, and where inside of 1 year, 33 individuals fatals in football games and 1 or 2 in the entire drag racing sport. So with speeds up to 190 miles an hour, this is a pretty doggone good average that we're real proud of.
Ed, one more thing I'd like to ask you about. Being a visitor, so to speak, here today at the drag strip, on the way from my motel to the gas station I stopped to gas to the cafe for breakfast, I've noticed that everyone here, at least in Pomona, has a good word for the hot rodder. Has this taken a long time for you to, say, qualify them as good citizens and not the hot rodder that people thought of years ago?
Jim, I'll tell you the actual facts. I've been with the National Hot Rod now over 6 years. Wherever hot rodding has been exposed to the town, and the town has given the kids a fair chance, drag racing, hot rodding has been more than welcomed by the parents, the civic groups, the town leaders, and everything else, because it occupies the teenage guy. As you know, first with a teenager comes the automobile. From the automobile, then he gets the girlfriend. They both work up this compatible relationship where they're now teamwork working on a car. Now, it doesn't have to go fast. The idea behind it is it's different. And this is the banner. This is a crusade with a teenage kid today. This is why a lot of them get in troubles. Their ideas of being different. But with hot rodding, they build a car. It's different. We give them a place to test and run it.
Well, Ed, all I can say is all the Capitol crew here today has been very impressed not only with the attitude of the kids, but with the safety. And for this, we'd kind of like to thank you.
Fine, Jim. Thank you very much. And likewise, we've been very impressed with the Capitol crew.
Oh, I did see it land on the strip. I can't spot it now. It is on the tower side. No interference with the street side going through. .60.
Every sport has to have its sponsors, its angels, and in drag racing, it's George Hurst, a man who can always be counted on for a few more prizes or trophies, and above all, a lot of time.
George, tell us a little bit about how you got into the manufacturing and also how you've become such a large sponsor of hot rod events.
Well, frankly, I started out in a small garage, repairing cars, building show cars, and building race cars. About 1957, I had built a handmade set of bumper guards for a Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. By a good chance of luck, Volkswagen of America got a look at this, and they were so interested in them, they gave me a contract to build $25,000 worth of them. And all I had at that time was this two-car garage, so I immediately went out and bought some tools, some machinery, and I produced the bumper guards as per my contract. After this, of course, the taste of manufacturing got in my blood, and it seemed a little better than repairing cars, and a little bit more a permanent way of making a living. So I investigated the performance market, being interested in race cars and so forth, and I saw there was a tremendous market for transmission controls.
But how did you ever get into a need for such a specialized piece of equipment as the shifting control for a transmission?
Well, with the drag racing thing came on pretty strong back in the late 50s, and column-shifted transmissions became to show their tremendous weaknesses. The linkage from the steering column down to the transmission is a long, complicated affair, and it's subject to a lot of wear and so
Strain
forth.
that normally would not take as in drag racing.
That's true.
George, let me ask you something. I noticed today that you're giving away 2 brand new automobiles to the both to the stock eliminator.
It's a factory stock eliminator and a super stock eliminator.
I understand that your company supports or supplies, I should say, a lot of new cars to the drag racing sport. Is it true you're going to give away 5 more of these cars at the Nationals in Indianapolis?
We intend to, Jim.
You're really that big of a sponsor? You enjoy the sport that much, or?
Well, drag racing has been tremendous to us, and we like to do anything we can in return. We feel we've gotten a lot out of drag racing, and we'd like to give back as much as we possibly can.
Well, the drag racing can use the support, and I'm certainly glad to see there are men that are willing to do it. Thank you very much, George.
Thank you, Jim, and we're glad to be a part of it.
Tommy Ivo. Some people call him the man from Hollywood. You've seen him in the Margie series, etc. Chrysler with the Enderley injection system on this one. A 3-port Enderley injection system up front. Tommy Ivo out of Burbank, a Hollywood area. Chrysler AA Fueler Dragster. Ran in match races throughout the coast here, the West Coast. Puts on a terrific show. He wins most of his match races also. He's really in there in Wales. He gets in the low 8s, right at the very bottom, like 802. 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, 802. He must go today to qualify. He is very capable. A real good last time, not good enough today. 187.10, 187.10 miles per hour. We'll give you the name, etc. of the gentleman that won that Mercury, a real lucky gentleman. Here we go, a convertible on the line. Elf Auto Parts. Machine shop, speedwork, auto repair. Steve Allard. Freeside to Pass Brock, Gary Anderson on his way. Tower side's in there.
Dr. Nathan Ostage, a physician who happens to like fast automobiles, owns one of the fastest cars in the world, a jet-powered monster in which he yearly attempts to go over 400 miles an hour. Here he tells us about it.
Doc, tell me, how did you make the transformation between regular engine modified cars and this jet plane route?
Well, what really got me into it is after I set up the motorcycle to run the supercharger and got the big Chrysler engine for that chopped Henry J, they changed the rule just before Bonneville, said you couldn't have 2 engines. So I scrapped it and decided to then look around for a big one, and the Allisons were too hard to work with, and I have a patient that's in the aeromotive surplus business, and I started talking jets to him, and so he went down and got me a pod out of a B-36 with 2 jets in it, and we hauled it in, dismantled it, and started building around it.
How fast have you gone in the car, Doc?
360.
Do you feel that this year may be the year for you to get the big one?
Well, this year, I made 7 runs over 350 last year, and we ran around in the same area. So we're going to have to make a design change, but I'm really looking for a different engine.
A little more power, maybe, huh?
A little more power, or maybe even going into a rocket.
Is Ray Brock still working with you on the project? Yes, he's a fine man.
Yes,
Well, listen, Doc, lots of luck in the future, and certainly hope you get the big one.
Well, thank you very much.
1857. There we go. A little beyond. 11-18, 11-18. 144.69 miles per hour. There we have injected Chevrolet. Utilization number 46. Keith Ventura Williamson. Robert Keith, the driver, Santa Clara, California. 57, a 283 cubic inch block, B dragster. Tower side A gas supercharged machine, 239, a Willis. Severs, Wiesner, Owens, Dean Severs the driver, Loveland, Colorado. It's an Oldsmobile, 57 Oldsmobile power plant for that A-gas supercharged machine.
No history of drag racing could be complete without an interview with Don Garlits. For the past 3 or 4 years, almost unbeatable on any track in any state he's raced in. A man who truly deserves to be called the #1 fuel dragster driver in the world.
Don, how did you ever become a professional drag racer?
Well, it's kind of started by degrees. We originally just were, drag racing like everybody else, coupes and sedans, and we wanted to go faster and faster. They didn't have dragsters then, so we removed parts from the car. Till finally we just had the frames, and then we started moving the engines around, and it evolved into what we have today.
But where did you make the change from amateur to professional, where you're on the road almost 52 weeks a year and racing at all the different tracks in the country?
Well, the change came gradually, naturally. It wasn't an overnight thing, but as the car began to make more and more money, and it required more and more time to keep it up, we have a business at home, but I more or less got away from that.
How long have you held your #1 rating?
For a couple of years now.
Now, I noticed when I'm looking at your car here, this is Swamp Rat the 5th. Is this a new car or one that you've been running for a little while?
We've had this car for 2 months.
This is a 2-month car.
Yeah.
It's a little longer than ones you've been running in the past.
Yes, it is.
A little longer wheelbase. Tell me, Don, I'd like to know a little bit about coming out of the hole. You're noted for being one of the fastest people there is at coming out of the hole or off the line. What is your technique in firing this car off the line?
Well, the thing that I practice on is being the same every time. And if you get into a habit is much easier to do than trying to think about doing something every time. So it's more important, I think, to get in a habit of doing the same thing every time than it is to worry about getting off the line differently. And that's what I credit the fact that I can get off the line with or ahead of most drivers.
Let me ask you a question. If a boy in hot rodding or a young man was going to go into dragster driving, would you recommend him going to gas before he does fuel or directly into fuel?
Well, definitely, there'd be no doubt about that. Fuel would be, after years of practicing and running, and not even a AA gas dragster I wouldn't recommend. You get something small that runs in the 100, 115 mile an hour bracket, and you work up. That's how I did it. And it was the first car I ever had, ran 65 1/4. And this is why I think that's the safe way to go.
In other words, leave the big ones to the pros and build up to them gradually.
You get your years of service in, and you know what's happening. You understand what's going on down there at 190 or whatever it is. Then you can try it. You don't just hop in one of those things and go fast.
It doesn't seem to be a place to make mistakes. Lots of luck in your future, and thank you very much for giving us this interview.
Did it to him, tower side. 10-17. 1:35.95. Correction, it was a 10:48, a 10:48. The street side was in there. 10:65. 1:31.96. 1:31.96. On guys, I believe that's the controls. A heavy hit forward. 4:23. Too much wheel staff. Apparently with a good bite off the line, just a little too much. It didn't ease off and come down like it normally does. Usually they can come out of that pretty decent. There he had just a little too much bite. He continues straight ahead way down there and take his left. So it'll be a moment or two before he is completely clear of the track. Tower side, A, competition injected. Looks like Enderley injection system. Farland, Bushell, and Williams. Both of them drive North Hollywood 58 Chevrolet power plant. Street side. Injected Chevrolet machine. We cannot figure out that number. On his way. 78. 1:46:10, the tower side.
The last race, the top eliminator between the two fastest cars after 3 days of grueling racing. If you'll listen to the crowd reaction, you'll hear how much excitement is generated on a Sunday afternoon at the drag races.
First onto the track is Tommy Ivo. This is for Top Fuel Eliminator. The fastest cars at the 64 Winter Nationals. The fastest cars. Those are the AA fuelers, and here they are. The finalists, the two top cars. Tommy Ivo now on the street side, his push truck, or push car, or push wagon, with the tires strapped to the top. These tires are very wide that these fellows use. They're over 10 inches wide these days, and made of soft, slick rubber so that they can gain maximum traction. On the spectator side, we've got the Williams Crosley Swan machine over from Bakersfield. Jack Williams driving. We're ready to go, so bring them down. Here they go, the big fuelers getting ready to fire up. Crosley, Williams, Swan on the spectator side. Tommy Ivo on the street side. It'll end up reversed. They'll swing over to the opposite side in just a moment, and we are on our way. Tommy Ivo has been turning the last few runs in the 7-second bracket, the high 7.9s. Jack Williams has been right at 8.0s, so he's a little short on the elapsed time department right now. He's a class winner. He had the tired engine after all the battles yesterday. He's first up to the line on the street side, Jack Williams. Tommy Ivo with his heart in his mouth on the spectator side. Poison Ivo, his competitors call him. This is it. This is for all the marbles here at the Winter National Championship drag races. There you go, Jack Williams. Let's be starting line first. Tom Ivo now on the spectator side, coming up the stage. There goes the start. Crosley Williams won. Jack Williams, a lap time, 8.16 seconds. Tommy Ivo at 8.24 seconds. Street side. Jack Williams, top speed, 193.12 miles per hour.
To wrap up our album, we've asked Mr. Wally Parks, president of the National Hot Rod Association, to tell us about the past accomplishments of the NHRA, its present operations, and its planned future.
The National Hot Rod Association was first formed in 1951 as a car club organization. Its main purposes were to provide events, to obtain recognition and gain public acceptance for hot rodding. It soon became evident that there was a need for some type of performance activity, which led quite naturally to quarter-mile drag races. These were conducted on surplus airfields or any available runway that could be obtained in the community where the club or organization sponsoring the drag races could produce their events. NHRA became the pioneer and trailblazer for drag racing, providing safety rules, competition classes, insurance programs, and general operating procedures. As a sports major sanctioning organization, NHRA regularly includes more than 100 drag strips as its active affiliates throughout the United States, in Canada, and Puerto Rico. Division directors are on full-time duty for NHRA, supervising the progress of the sport in all areas across the United States. Record certification teams under the division directors supervise and verify the authenticity of national performance records, both in top speed and elapsed time, in a total of 73 competition classes. Quality insurance programs have become important and are maintained for the benefit of contestants, spectators, and drag strip operators. Safety regulations and competition classes are reviewed annually to keep abreast of the sport's tremendous progress. NHRA publishes the official rule books each year, which are used as a standard operating guide for drag strips everywhere. Operating procedures developed as a result of experience attained at hundreds of active drag strips everywhere are provided by NHRA as the standard pattern. Popularization of the sport through publicity and the production of major national events such as the Nationals, Winter Nationals, Regionals, Divisionals, and the seasonal World Points Championship program are keeping the sport up at its high peak of popularity. One of drag racing's best accomplishments is the maintenance of its safety record. In 1963 alone, over 172,000 cars were entered in competition, which accounted for more than 1 million timed runs. Even so, with this much activity running at high speed, the sport's safety record was comparable to or better than any other sport with a similar number of participants. Much of the credit for drag racing's accomplishment today can be placed upon the cooperation that it has received from civic officials and enforcement leaders everywhere, who have recognized the values in quarter-mile acceleration and the maintenance of the vehicles that are running there, and have given their stamp of endorsement and approval to the sport. The National Hot Rod Association appreciates the cooperation it has received from its participants, from the strip operators, from civic officials, and law enforcement leaders. Without their support, the sport could never have grown to its present prominence, and we hope we can continue working in harmony with all of them for a bigger and better drag racing sport.